Let me get it started again. Get it set. Welcome to the Strenuous Life Radio, the podcast for men and women, leaders, entrepreneurs, and leaderpreneurs desiring to know the specialties and soft skills of the strenuous life. This is episode 98. The interesting relationship between John F. Kennedy and his father. Now, I'll tell you something. Kind of reminds me of that rascal German band.
We all live in America, America, America. We all live in America.
Now, let me tell you something. Joseph P. Kennedy was a rascal. He was a stock speculator, kind of like a gambler. He was a bootlegger. And he liked to chase women. And speaking of them Germans, let me tell you something. Before World War II came out, the stories were all buzzing around the grapevine like kudzu around the British Embassy. Because he was ambassador to Europe. He sympathized with them Germans. You think about that. Now, relationship between John F. Kennedy and his father was something else. He was at high school, at that boarding school in Choate. And while them rich people up north that sent their kids off to them schools instead of being with their parents back then, is crazy. His father was always complaining. Wanted to separate him from his best friend, who was his roommate, Talking, even though they're friends and everything. The little dialogue and the phone calls between him and that crazy schoolmaster. And JFK formed what was known as the Muckers Club. And, of course, Joe had to come down to talk him out of expelling him. They just kept JFK over Easter vacation. But when Headmaster exited the door, his back turned, he said, it would have been interesting. I like that you named it the Muckers Club. He said, I just would like to have something that rhymes. Now, I ain't going to say something off color on the air, no cuss words. Because, well, me and Jimmy, we kind of alike. I have a few cuss words that I don't mind because they're in the Bible. But anyway, that's how it is. Not long after that, his father, even though he don't want to, his father sends him off to the London School of Economics after graduation from the boarding school. And he gets sick. And he wants to come home. So his dad didn't let him come home, and he and his father don't want him to go to Princeton with his best friend, but he decides to go. Well, guess what? He's there about maybe a couple months. He gets sick again. So his father puts him in the hospital in this rest area ranch in Arizona. And he comes home for part of the summer. And then after that, he's kind of like, you know what? All right, Daddy, you got your wish. I'm going to Harvard. Now, while he was at Harvard at first, he was echoing his daddy's political views for Franco in the Spanish Civil War and stuff like that. But then, the summer between his freshman and sophomore year at Harvard, he and his best friend Lem decided to go on this little junket to Europe. You ought to read about that on the internet, the logs and everything. It's pretty interesting. Only I doubt I would have stayed that long. Anyway, Jack comes out with some interesting observations. And then he starts Harvard again, and his views began to change, his insights began to change, and then he comes back, he goes to England in the summer, to Great Britain in the summer of 1938. Let me tell you something, he came alive. It was an eye-opener seeing his father in the embassy. And he started saying, well, wait a minute. This is something for me to further analyze. And then he returns for his junior year at Harvard. He goes for the fall semester in his junior year. The spring semester, his daddy says, you're coming up to Europe with me. So his dad had Harvard give him some kind of study abroad grant or some stuff. And he goes to spend some time in Europe, studies under his father. Supposedly, he showed up late for his studies his senior year in Harvard. Now, let me tell you something, that's crazy. And then he gets his thesis, and he writes it and everything, and his daddy's all happy. Well, somewhat. Because it's at that point that Jack Kennedy started disagreeing with his daddy. See, his daddy was a Nazi sympathizer. It's 1940. He's about to be cut down from being ambassador to Great Britain. And as a result, he's proud that Jack got that thesis, and the thesis gets turned into a book. So anyway, he goes off to Stanford, away from his father and everything, so he can think. Because his father's being hyper reactive at this point, Hitler's going to be angry also. They're writing all the letters. While he's away from Stanford, Franklin Roosevelt calls Joe Kennedy down to Hyde Park. And they had a disagreement. And he fires Joe Kennedy. Okay, Jack spends only the fall semester in Stanford. He's auditing some business courses. And he gets sick. So he spends about a couple months in the hospital. And then he's lounging around Hyannisport in Palm Beach. And then, I'd say around May, June, he decides, I'm going to South America. I want to try out the politics in South America. And he met some prominent people. Had a little brief love interest fling with some little Chiquita, if you know what I mean. Maybe two of them at one time, who knows. I tell you something, by the time he was coming of age, back in the 1930s and 1940s, he was somewhat becoming a rascal like his daddy. And then, of course, September 1941, he gets called into naval intelligence. And I'll be darned, he falls in love with a woman that his father believes is a German spy. FBI. Get in there. And as a result, in January 1942, his daddy makes a few phone calls, pulls a string and transfers him out of there. And let me tell you something, Jack is mad as hell at this point. Because about maybe a month or two later, that relationship with her was busted. He didn't like it. So he's stuck in this little backwater base in Charleston. And finally, in May, he calls his daddy and says, I want to be transferred. His daddy said, okay, I'll ship your butt off to indoctrination school in Chicago. So he drives first to Washington, D.C. to have one last talk with his girlfriend. And then he goes off to Chicago. And then his father's getting restless with him being in Chicago. So he talked to some higher-ups in the Navy and everything. And By October, he was transferred to a torpedo boat school in, kind of near home. And around that time, JFK was being some Mac Daddy. Just really showing his stuff. And then they wanted to keep him indefinitely. But both Kennedys got a hold of some senators, and they went ahead and shipped him off to war. All right. Of course, he comes back from the war. He says his ex-girlfriend, one last time, and she's stuck up in San Francisco with some actor. So then he wanders around kind of directionless for a while until the founding of the United Nations. His daddy contacts a few people, allow him to take another adventure in Europe, foreign policy and getting with women, just a bunch of intrigue. But Joe Kennedy stayed in the background at that point because he wanted his son in politics. He thought that his older son, Joe Jr. would, but Joe Jr. got killed in the war. And as John F. Kennedy gets involved in Congress and everything, his ideologies and things began to change. No doubt causing some problems with his father, but by the time 1952 came along, his daddy said, "You better run for Senate." He said, "Your granddad Fitzgerald got defeated by the first Henry Cabot Lodge. This other one's about your age, maybe a little older. You need to beat him." He said he's already won 3 times, wants to try again. And JFK beat him, won for the Senate, and then he gets engaged to Jackie Booby. Let me tell you something. His father liked her. Now, some of the rest of the family didn't like her that much at first. But then eventually they got married, and the father kind of faded off. Wasn't really that much involved in his political goals. And he ran for president. Of course, he ain't in office as president of years. His father had a stroke, but it was a complicated issue. Now, I hope that you enjoy listening to the Streamless Life Radio. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, become a part of our family. It's Jr Hendrick saying until next time, don't you just sit there and take it. Feel your dreams so you can take it. Do what others don't so you can do what others won't. Do what others don't so you can have what others can't. You think strong, you live strong, and y'all have a blessed day. Y'all take care now. Y'all hear?